Talk Eagles and NFL with 97.3 ESPN.com's John McMullen. Follow him on Twitter at JFMcMullen. 8 weeks in, you would think that you would have some sort of definitive feel about this team. You're shaking your head.
No, not at
Nobody
all.
seemingly does. But the conversation we had to start this show about Golden Tate definitely makes us feel much, I would say, definitively more excited getting out of this bye week than if they had done nothing. So, let me ask you, John, even if they didn't get Golden Tate, do you think that the arrow was finally pointing up for the final half of this season?
Yeah, I don't know, because I kind of felt it was pointing up after the Giants game, and really felt that way after the third quarter of the Carolina game. And then it all kind of fell off the rails. So, I mean, that's the story. When you're 4-4, it basically says you're inconsistent, and that's kind of defined the Eagles in the first half of the season. But from their standpoint, that's what the Golden Tate trade tells you. They feel they're still a contender. So that's something. I mean, because they could have, and I think it would have been interesting to see what they would have done or what they wouldn't have done if they lost against Jacksonville. I think maybe they don't make this trade. That's how important that game was. They feel they can win the division, get in the playoffs, and from there, anything can happen, especially if Carson Wentz gets hot at the right time. And I think that's the feeling inside the NovaCare complex, at least.
Is there, as they get to the bye week and now get ready for the second half, is there a belief that there is more to Carson Wentz than we saw in the first half? Like getting his
good.
I know that, but that's my question. That's my point. Is are they expecting more from him this second half? Okay, he was coming off this injury. I don't want to say he got rushed back, but he got back sooner than someone like me, maybe not you, thought that he would have been. I mean, it's still a very early timeline for someone with that injury. Do they feel that maybe there is another level to get to the second half?
Yeah, I think they figure some of the decision making. If there's one thing you point at and are critical about, it's some of the decision making, and I think maybe part of that is the inactivity and being off for so long. So from that standpoint, that should only improve physically. The farther you get away from the injury, the better you feel. Although if you didn't know he was injured, you probably couldn't tell a difference. But there is a difference. Every doctor will tell you need a full 12 months at least from a health standpoint to get back to where you were before. So that will continue to get a little bit better. But, yeah, I mean, he hasn't been the problem. But you do expect slight incremental improvement from a health standpoint and from a rush standpoint, I think, every week.
Do you think that, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, but it's kind of interesting at the bye to kind of look at where this team will be at the end of the year, despite what they do, because if they find magic and go on a run, it still doesn't remove some issues that I'm going to ask you about, and if they don't even make the playoffs, well, then they're going to make those issues even more glaring. But do you sense an area on this team that's going to go through anywhere near an overhaul as far as draft, free agent, just upgrading, and maybe even to the point, John, in which you just don't even recognize a position or the majority of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple positions. One, defensive end, because you're talking about age and big contracts. And it's conceivable that Brandon Graham, Michael Bennett, and Chris Long are all gone, either via contract issues, salary cap issues, signing elsewhere, retirement in Chris Long's case. And then all of a sudden you're moving forward with Derek Barnett and Josh Sweat, and obviously you'd have to bring in reinforcements. I don't think all three are going to be gone. I do think Chris is this is it for him. I think he's going to retire. I can't see why the Eagles wouldn't bring Brandon Graham back. He's playing at such a high level again. But there's money issues, and this team is has to sort of budget moving forward and understanding they're going to have to pay Carson Wentz at some point. So that's one. And running back is another. I think, Jay Ajayi's not going to be back, let's be honest. And I think and I'm in this category, so I think people are disappointed in Corey Clement to this point. I don't know if you can count on him being a feature back anytime soon. And you're talking about guys like Wendell Smallwood and Josh Adams, who's undrafted. You got to get better there, and Darren Sproles has already said he's going to retire. So both of those positions could be drastically different.
John McMullen here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, 97.3 ESPN.com, as the Eagles at the bye week. The other interesting point about last year, this team it wasn't one guy. It was the whole feeling that Wentz got everybody involved, right? I mean, you had Jeffrey one week, Aguilar the next week, Ertz was in the mix. Then you had Ajayi had a big game, and Blunt had a big game. Does adding Golden Tate give you that ability now to have a more spread out offense and get closer to what you were doing so successfully last year? Or did they have that opportunity now and just not utilize it?
Well, they have the opportunity
previously.
I mean, you can move the football around to whoever you want, but the question is, what are they going to do with it? I think that's been the issue.
Right.
Nelson Aguilar's had some volume. He hasn't done much with it. I think Golden Tate's going to do more, and that's going to open things up for other players. I asked Doug about that last week, about how Alshon and Zach Ertz centric this offense was. It was basically those two guys shouldering the brunt of the load ever since Jeffrey came back. And it's great for those two players, and they look phenomenal, but it's not great for the offense as a whole. And I talked about it a lot in the fact that Zach Ertz having a historic season. From the Eagles' standpoint, it's probably better he catches 5 or 6 a game than 10, because you don't want to force feed it, and you want to get other people involved, and you don't want to show these tendencies to opposing defenses. So I think having a playmaker, it was paramount to this team, and that's why they went out and got one, because they badly needed one.
Can you see, and I don't know how much we talked about this yesterday at all. If we did, apologize, because, as you know, my brain's mush. Can you see any realistic scenario, and it's a two-part thing in order for this thing to happen, in which Golden Tate plays his ass off, and the Eagles are able to re-sign him?
Yeah, I mean, Howie Roseman has proven that he can move things around and keep whoever he wants. So I don't think there's any question. If he plays well over the final 8 games, they make the playoffs, he plays well in the playoffs, he turns out to be the player he's always been. I don't think there's any question the Eagles are going to want to bring him back. I think then you start talking about moving on from Nelson Aguilar and all the repercussions of signing a player, re-signing a player like that. But he's proven again and again and again, when it looks like there's no space, he's going to find space. And whether it's redoing big contracts, he did it with Fletcher to get this space, to get Golden Tate. He's going to do it. If he wants them, he's going to be able to keep them.
Yeah, I mean, and that question was asked yesterday. I think it was Ruben Franco asked him about, has his agent, is there any thought of already, signing? And I guess the question would be, you mentioned it, age. In the NFL, you get old quick. This roster is in a weird spot right now. I mean, Peter's old. Kelsey, I guess you got to start thinking about that position. You've got the defensive side of the ball. You mentioned Bennett, Long. Malcolm Jenkins is one of these years. He's just not going to be Malcolm Jenkins all of a sudden anymore. So, a 30-year-old receiver, I guess the question will be, how does he produce right now? But then you got to make the decision. All right, do we want to keep him? You have him and Alshon Jeffrey. Then you're basically saying we need a new set of receivers here pretty soon. Those guys are both over 30, right?
Yeah, I mean this roster is the roster of a contender. There's a lot of veteran players on the cusp of what you're talking about, and Golden's one of them. You know what 30 means in this league, and he's not only 30. He's 30 with a guy who's taken a ton of punishment over the years because of the way he plays and how physical he is, and he's not big. I mean, he's very powerful in the lower body, but he's a 5'11" receiver. He's not a big guy. So you're right. I mean, when the decline comes in this league, it tends to come pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And that's, you got to add that into the mix.
Yeah,
There's no question about it.
And you're in a spot, John, where the offensive line and the defensive line are getting old, at least on the ends. Well, maybe not Lane Johnson, but you're getting Peters, and I don't know, Brandon Brooks, I guess, is still right there. I mean, he's probably good for the next 2-3 years, but at least 2 guys on the offensive line, maybe 3 guys on the defensive line. So if you're looking at skill position players too, that's a lot of retinkering to do over a short amount of time.
Yeah, and this team is the window is open. They see the window is open. They got one. They're trying to get another. Part of it has to do, we talked yesterday about Carson's being on his rookie deal, so this is the time you can do some of those. You know, people ask, well, why would Detroit trade a player that has been so productive and continues to be productive and is really having career numbers from his standpoint, and his numbers were already good, because he's a free agent and they weren't going to re-sign him because of his age, because of the money, and because they're not ready to compete. So those are some of the questions they already answered. And that, for them, the third-round pick was more important. For a team that considers itself a contender, the productive player is more important.
You know, John, one thing that hasn't been discussed a lot because of the record, and I think the 2 ways in which they blew leads, but the reality is if this defense continues to play at anywhere near the same clip in which they have been, they'll finish as a top 5 defense in the NFL, and that's
amazing, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is in the sense of how the general conversation has been, but I think on a week-to-week, just having conversations with people like you and keeping the conversation honest, it's not as big of a shock to me, but I think to the average person it is, when you look and say, wow, they're that high. But you know where I'm going. This begs the question, what happens to the coordinator?
Well, I mean, the coordinator is very well respected, so there's always a chance. I mean, he's obviously an ambitious guy. He's obviously wants to be head coach in this league if he gets an opportunity.
That hasn't gone away, right?
Yeah, he's out the door. He's out the door yesterday. But this league is changing, and I've said it before. If I'm looking for a head coach in this league, I'm not even thinking about a defensive guy. So that hurts Jim Schwartz. And there's a lot of teams, not everybody. Look what Cleveland just did. They elevated Greg Williams, who evidently got interviews and offered head coaching jobs all over the place. But
if you're Cleveland and you see that guy give that hello, basically, are you rethinking why did we promote this guy?
Well, you're
he's
Cleveland,
a nut to begin
so you're
with.
rethinking everything you do.
Right. I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
he's a nut to begin with, and then he goes out and says that?
Yeah, that was a dumb thing to say, and that's the reason he's not going to be the head coach next year. But one of the reasons, one of the many reasons. But as a whole, there's not a lot of teams. Typically, there's 7, 8 at the most openings in an NFL offseason. Most of those teams are going to be looking for offensive coaches, so that obviously hurts Jim Schwartz.
John, curious, I don't know if you saw, but it went viral a little bit, but clearly you have more important things to do to focus on Matt Patricia press conferences where he ripped.
Oh, this is great.
Chastises.
I'm glad you're asking me.
Okay, good. So I want to get your general reaction to it. I don't know if you know the reporter in question, but after you do that, the other question I have is, have you ever seen anything like that up close and personal where it was a personal shot at a reporter, not so much an issue with their line of questioning or why they're asking about Carson Wentz, even though Ian Rappaport already broke a report?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of angst. We've seen a lot this year between us and Doug Peterson. it usually doesn't get that personal.
Right.
As far as, picking at somebody's, I said, come on, Matt Patricia, is grooming, is that professional? Grooming once a month?
Yes. The guy's got a three-quarter hoodie on. Like a slob out there.
is wearing a clown shirt of the commissioner of the NFL, is that professional?
That's a great point.
The guy's a joke. And I'm not even going to bring up the allegations he had when he was in college that almost cost him his first head coaching job before he took the field. It's obviously he decided to go in that direction, and it's ironic that he's calling somebody unprofessional, and he's the one who acted so unprofessional.
John, we know that the bye week is here, but you got Redskins, Falcons. We'll get more into these games as the week goes on, and then Tennessee and Dallas. 5-2. Are you ready to buy into the Redskins?
Well, I buy into them as an NFC East contender. I'm not buying into them as a legitimate Super Bowl contender.
Fair.
But I think they're relevant in this division. I've said a lot. This division's not as good as – well, I didn't think it was a good division. I thought it was the Eagles and everybody else as a whole. So they are a little bit better than I thought they were. The Eagles are not quite as good as I thought they would be. So, there's 8 games, and there's 5 division games for the Eagles. 2 of them against the Redskins. So they sort of control their own. It's going to be difficult. There's a small margin of error. And the Redskins keep handling their business, at least winning the games they should win.
And
sometimes they haven't looked very impressive. But
they play one team with a winning record the rest of the way.
Yeah, that helps.
No doubt.
That helps as well. And that's part of what you see in this league. One of the reasons you see somebody worst to first, and it happens every year in this league, it happened to the Eagles. The Eagles went from worst to Super Bowl champions. They were last place in the NFC East. One of the big reasons you see that every year is because of the schedule. And if you're a first-place team, you're playing a first-place schedule, and that's much more difficult. Go to the NFC North. The reason the Chicago Bears are in first place is that exact reason.
Sports Pass Live, 97.3 ESPN. John McMullen here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, giving us a little take on the NFL and the Eagles at the bye. We'll have plenty more on Week 9 coming up on tomorrow's show.
We have to ask him about Wheel of Fortune woman.
That's right.
Did you see this story? Josh, can we play the audio for John real quick, please?
The story of the
Wheel of Fortune Eagles fan. I'm calling BS on it, John, and I need your expertise on this. We're going to play you this audio from this woman who was on Wheel of Fortune, and she offered up how big of an Eagles fan she is. It went viral. Everybody in the greater Philadelphia, South Jersey is going nuts, but something about it rubbed me the wrong way. This is the clip, so just take a listen.
Originally from Philadelphia.
Okay, and so I guess all those Philly sports teams are still...
I'm a massive Eagles fan. I was late to my own wedding because I was watching an Eagles game.
Now, I don't know. Weddings are for women, not men. So normally it's the man convincing the woman to change the date because of an Eagles fan. If a man is so lucky that he can convince his bride, or if the bride has to convince the groom because she's the bigger Eagles fan, even more reason that wedding would never be scheduled on an Eagles game. So I have to call a little BS on how quote-unquote big of an Eagles fan this woman claims to be, John.
Well, if you're on TV, you're trying to get a good story. Yeah, I can't believe. I mean, if you're going to get married, you should be grown up to the point where you understand you're probably going to have to miss the football game. And obviously most games are on Sunday. Not too many people get married on Sundays.
Yes.
It's usually Friday, Saturday thing. So
if she were
probably,
saying, I was going to add.
Probably trying to get Pat Sajak excited.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was selfish intentions, and she used us as the means to get there, and I feel a little violated because if she actually got married on a Saturday, she would have said a rare Saturday game that I had to be late to.
I agree with that. That's a good point.
Don't be using my Eagles here to gain credit with Pat Sajak.
Well, she's also smart. I give her credit because if there's any fan base that's going to embrace that, it's this one.
Not too smart. I snuffed it out. And I'm an idiot.
All right, John. We'll talk to you tomorrow, man.
Thanks, John.
All right, thanks, guys.